Most gardeners treat wood chips like slow, stubborn piles of carbon that take years to break down, and honestly, that reputation is well-deserved. Left on their own, wood chips decompose painfully slowly, sometimes sitting there for 2 or 3 seasons before they even begin to soften. But the shocking part is that it doesn't have to be that way. There's a method, tested, simple, and wildly effective, that speeds up wood chip decomposition so dramatically that your compost can turn usable in a fraction of the time. No patience required, no endless waiting, no giant, steaming piles of wasted potential. If you're tired of watching wood chips sit and rot at a snail's pace, you're about to learn the technique that transforms them into living compost up to 10 times faster. Understanding why wood chips are slow is the first step to fixing the problem. Wood chips break down slowly for one main reason: they're almost pure carbon, and carbon by itself is like dry firewood, great fuel, but completely useless until it meets a spark. For microbes, the spark is nitrogen. Without nitrogen, the microbial workforce can't multiply, can't heat up, and can't digest wood fibers efficiently. When gardeners dump wood chips into a compost pile without a nitrogen plan, the microbes starve. The pile stays cold, the chips stay intact, and months later, you're staring at the same dry chips you started with. Wood also contains lignin, a tough, resistant compound that only specific fungi and bacteria can break down. That means you need the right biological conditions to attract the right decomposition team, and those conditions don't happen by accident. You have to create them deliberately. The secret to rapid wood chip composting is activating the nitrogen surplus environment. Here's the hidden trick successful gardeners use. They don't let wood chips rot on their own. They force them into balance. The fastest way to do that is by mixing your wood chips with a rich nitrogen source. That can be fresh grass clippings, manure, green weeds, food scraps, coffee grounds, or even diluted urine. The goal is to overwhelm the carbon with enough nitrogen to feed the microbial explosion that breaks down the chips. This doesn't mean simply sprinkling a handful of greens over your pile. You're aiming for a true blend, roughly 2 to 3 parts wood chips to 1 part high nitrogen material. When those ingredients combine and moisture levels are correct, the pile begins to heat fast. Once it hits that 130 to 150 degree range, decomposition speeds dramatically. You'll see the chips soften within weeks instead of years. Moisture control is what keeps the microbial engine running at full speed. A wood chip pile can look fine on the outside while being bone dry on the inside, and dry wood does not compost, ever. The trick is to saturate the pile deeply during the first build. You want it wet enough that the chips glisten, but not so wet that they drip. That initial hydration is the fuel microbes will use for weeks as they digest both carbon and nitrogen. After that, you only need to water lightly as the pile heats and cools. If you see white fungal threads weaving through the chips, you're doing things right. Those are the organisms responsible for breaking down lignin, and they only appear in moisture-balanced conditions. You can speed things up even more by inoculating with local soil life. One of the most overlooked techniques is adding a few shovels of living garden soil right into the pile. Wood chips out of the bag or out of the truckload have zero fungal or bacterial life. Your garden soil, however, is loaded with decomposers ready to work. When you add even a small amount, you inoculate the entire pile with organisms that know exactly how to digest woody material. You jumpstart the ecosystem instead of waiting for nature to discover your pile weeks later. Some gardeners take this even further by adding finished compost, worm castings, or forest floor leaf mold. These materials bring in diverse fungal strands, especially the ones that break down cellulose and lignin naturally. The more microbial diversity you add early, the faster the breakdown. Turning the pile will increase oxygen and dramatically speed decomposition. If you want maximum speed, you cannot skip turning. Wood chips are bulky, and bulky materials trap pockets of airless zones where decomposition slows to a crawl. Turning solves that. Every time you flip the pile, you introduce more oxygen, exposing new carbon surfaces to aerobic microbes. Heat increases, activity increases, decomposition accelerates. Turning every 10 to 14 days is ideal. Even twice a month can shave months off the final compost time. But here's the important part. If you can't turn it often, don't stress. The nitrogen and moisture steps alone will still speed up decomposition significantly. Turning simply takes your pile from fast to ultra-fast. What you end up with doesn't look like ordinary compost. And that's the beauty of it. When wood chips break down rapidly, they transform into something most gardeners overlook: fungal-rich compost that feeds perennials and shrubs more effectively than regular compost ever could. This material is darker, chunkier, and loaded with mycelium. Plants that thrive in fungal-dominated soils, berries, fruit trees, herbs, perennial vegetables, ornamentals respond unbelievably well. And here's the hidden advantage. Because wood-based compost continues to break down slowly after application, it becomes a long-lasting soil conditioner. Your soil gains structure, drainage improves, moisture retention increases, and beneficial fungal networks spread naturally. Stop letting wood chips rot slowly when you can turn them into compost gold. The difference between slow rotting and fast composting all comes down to intention. If you dump wood chips and walk away, they'll take forever. But if you fuel them, hydrate them, inoculate them, and give them oxygen, they'll break down so quickly you may barely recognize them by the end of the season. And once you've seen how powerful this method is, you'll never pour wood chips into a slow, forgotten pile again. You'll turn them into the nutrient-rich, fungal-dominant compost your garden has been craving. If this helped you rethink how you use wood chips, make sure you subscribe and share this video so more gardeners can transform their piles into rich living compost instead of waiting years for results.